The metal bench was so cold it felt like it was burning through my jeans. I curled my fingers into my palms, my nails biting into my skin, trying to anchor myself to something, anything, other than this reality. The smell was the worst part, industrial cleaner that couldn't hide the sour sweat and old fear. A single, harsh fluorescent light buzzed overhead, flickering every few seconds, making the shadows in the holding cell jump. My heart was a frantic animal slamming against my ribs. This couldn't be happening. I was Sharon Mendez. I taught Sunday school. I brought the green bean casserole to the church potluck. I was the one who always made sure the offering baskets had the velvet liners straight. I squeezed my eyes shut, but all I could see was Pastor Mike's face. Not angry, not even disappointed, just shattered, and my own hand, my own trembling, traitorous hand, slipping the thick envelope from the locked drawer in the church office. The envelope marked Building Fund, the one I'd watched Deacon Johnson place there after the service, stuffed with cash and checks from a congregation who believed in a new roof for the youth wing. The weight of it in my purse had felt like a stone dragging me straight to hell. A heavy key rattled in the door, and I flinched so hard my shoulder hit the cinder block wall. The door swung open with a metallic groan, and a female officer with tired eyes looked at a clipboard. Mendez. Her voice was flat, drained of all judgment. That was worse. Somehow, if she'd yelled, I could have gotten angry. Her emptiness just mirrored my own. She didn't handcuff me, just gestured for me to follow. As I walked, the squeak of my sneakers on the polished floor echoed in the silent hallway. Every step screamed, thief, fraud, hypocrite. We stopped at another door, this one with a small, wire-reinforced window. In here, she said. Your pastor is coming. Pastor Mike is coming. The words were a verdict. My legs gave out, and I sank onto another cold bench, alone in this interrogation room. This was it. The truth, my truth, was about to crash into the one place I'd tried to build a life of lies. The shame was a physical taste, like copper and dirt. In my mouth, I was going to be exposed, charged, and every single person in Rockford, Illinois would know what I had done. My parents, my friends from Bible study, the kids I taught about Zacchaeus, the wee little man who gave back what he stole. They would all know I was a wee little liar. But to understand how I got here, I need to take you back to where it all began. It began 3 weeks ago, on a Tuesday, with a disconnect notice. I was sitting at the kitchen table of our small, 2-bedroom apartment, the one with the perpetually dripping faucet. My son, Caleb, was 7, and he was at the table too, coloring a picture of a dinosaur with intense concentration, his tongue poking out the side of his mouth. The notice was bright red, stamped with urgent. The electric bill was 2 months past due. My part-time job at the library wasn't cutting it, not since the hours got cut. My husband Mark had been gone for a year and a half. Not dead, just gone. He said he needed to find himself, which turned out to be code for moving to Arizona with his dental hygienist. The child support checks were as reliable as a forecast for snow in July. Before I continue, I'd love to know where are you watching from. Drop your location and what time it is where you are in the comments. It means the world to me to know who's hearing this story. I remember folding that red notice into a tiny, tight square, my knuckles white. Caleb looked up, his big brown eyes so much like his father's it sometimes stole my breath. You okay, Mom? Perfect, baby, I said, forcing a smile that felt like a crack in plaster. Just boring grown-up stuff. That Sunday, I sat in my usual pew, 4th from the front, left side. I sang the hymns, I recited the Lord's Prayer. I passed the offering basket without putting anything in. My empty wallet was a knot of guilt in my lap. When Pastor Mike prayed for those facing financial hardships, my throat closed up. Yes, I thought, pray for them. Pray for me. But when the amen echoed, my disconnect notice was still waiting at home, and my fridge was still echoingly empty. After service, I volunteered to help count the offering, like I often did. It was me, Deacon Johnson, a kind man in his 60s, with liver-spotted hands and sweet old Mrs. Gable who always smelled of lavender. We sat in the tidy office, the safe open behind Pastor Mike's desk. The money was sorted into neat piles, bills smoothed, checks paper-clipped together. The casual, holy normality of it all was a knife in my heart. Deacon Johnson stacked the cash for the building fund donations for that new roof. It was a lot. Hundreds, maybe thousands. In crisp 20s and 50s. He slid it into a heavy manila envelope, sealed it, and wrote, "Building Fund," in his careful script. "Lock this in the top drawer for now, Sharon," he said, handing it to me. "Pastor will take it to the bank tomorrow." He and Mrs. Gable left, chatting about the sermon. I was alone in the office, the envelope in my hands. It felt warm. It hummed with possibility. I could almost hear the numbers in my head. This could cover the electric. This could buy groceries. This could get Caleb those new sneakers he's outgrown. My breath came short. This wasn't some abstract idea. This was a specific, locked-away solution to my very specific screaming problems. A verse I'd taught the kids flashed, unbidden and cruel. "For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil." 1 Timothy 6:10. This wasn't love. I argued with myself. Desperate. This was survival. This was for Caleb. My hands were sweating. I heard Deacon Johnson's laugh echo down the hall. In one frantic, fluid motion, I yanked open my large tote bag and shoved the envelope deep inside. Beneath my Bible and a half-eaten bag of goldfish crackers, I closed the empty drawer and locked it with the key from the ring. The metal felt icy. I walked out of the church, my legs moving on their own. My smile brittle as I said goodbye to friends in the parking lot. The envelope in my bag felt like it was screaming. But as I drove home, the screaming in my bag slowly merged with the screaming in my mind. And by the time I pulled into my apartment's lot, a terrible, quiet conviction had settled over me. It wasn't a solution. It was a bomb. And I had just lit the fuse. I didn't open the envelope that night. I left it in my bag. A poisonous secret sitting by the front door. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Deacon Johnson's trusting face. I got up and checked on Caleb, his peaceful face lit by his nightlight. "I did it for you," I thought, but the words rang hollow in the dark. Holy silence of my own heart. I had done it for me. For the panic. For the shame of being the one needing the prayer instead of offering it. The bomb detonated faster than I expected. Monday afternoon, my phone rang. It was Pastor Mike. His voice was calm, but there was a strain underneath it. "Sharon, hi. Could you come by the church office sometime tomorrow? We can't seem to locate the building fund offering from yesterday. Since you were the last one with it, we just want to retrace steps. I'm sure it's just misplaced." His words were gentle, believing. They flayed me alive. I sat on my couch, the phone limp in my hand, staring at my tote bag where it sat, innocent and guilty, by the door. I had a choice. I could take the envelope back, make up some story about finding it in my car, my bag, something. It would be awkward, but maybe it would be okay. Or I could run. I looked at the red disconnect notice on my fridge. I thought of Caleb's trusting smile, and in that moment, fractured by fear, I made my decision. I wouldn't run, but I wouldn't return it. Not yet. I would wait, just a little longer. Just until I knew for sure. That was my last, fateful mistake. Because Pastor Mike, trusting as he was, had already called the bank to see if perhaps someone had dropped it in the night deposit. They said no. And the church's security camera, a tiny, discreet dome in the corner of the office ceiling that I had forgotten about entirely, had already told its silent, undeniable story. The security camera. Those 3 words exploded in my mind, wiping out every other thought. A silent, black dome in the corner of the office ceiling. I'd walked under it 1,000 times. I'd even dusted it once. It was just part of the room, like a light fixture or a smoke detector. I never thought about it being a witness. My body went hot, then freezing cold. The phone slipped from my hand and thudded onto the couch cushion. Pastor Mike's voice, tinny and confused, called out from the speaker. "Sharon? You there?" I couldn't breathe. They knew. He knew. He wasn't calling to retrace steps. He was calling to give me a chance to confess before he had to do something about it. The kindness in his voice was worse than any accusation. It was the kindness you show someone right before the execution. I fumbled for the phone, my fingers numb. Yeah. "I can come tomorrow," I heard myself say, my voice strangled and high-pitched. We said quick, awkward goodbyes. I sat there, staring at the wall. For a long time. The ticking of the kitchen clock was a countdown. Caleb's school bus would drop him off in 20 minutes. That thought finally jolted me into movement. I couldn't fall apart yet. I grabbed my tote bag, my hands trembling violently. I carried it into my bedroom, shut the door, and upended it onto my bed. My Bible, the goldfish crackers, old receipts, and the manila envelope tumbled out. It looked so ordinary. I picked it up. It was still sealed. I tore it open. The money inside was a shock of color and promise. More cash than I'd held in years. I didn't count it. I just stared. This was the price of my soul. It felt pitifully small. A sob rose in my throat, but I choked it back. I couldn't. Not now. I had to think. If the camera saw me, then it was only a matter of time before they called the police. Would they? This was a church. Wouldn't they try to handle it in-house? A wild, desperate hope flared. Maybe they'd just want the money back. Maybe they'd forgive me and let me work it off. Maybe this would be my rock-bottom story of redemption one day. But another voice, colder and more realistic, whispered, "This is a building fund. Donors gave that money. It's not just the church's money. It's a trust. And you violated it." I thought of Mr. Henderson, the retired contractor who'd pledged $5,000. I thought of the Larson family, who'd sold cookies to raise their $50 contribution. My stomach twisted. I shoved the money back into the envelope. I had to hide it. But where? The apartment was small, and the thought of it being here, near Caleb, felt like a contamination. I finally slid it under my mattress. The classic, stupid hiding place of every guilty person. It made a faint, crinkling sound. I smoothed the bedspread over it, my heart hammering. The front door slammed. "Mom, I'm home!" Caleb's voice, bright and alive, sliced through the toxic silence of my room. I pasted on a smile, walked out and hugged him too tight. He smelled of sunshine and boy sweat. "Whoa, okay," he laughed, squirming away. "Can I have a snack?" "Sure, baby." I made him peanut butter on crackers, poured a glass of milk. I watched him chatter about his day, about a kid named Alex who shared his markers, about the kickball game at recess. His world was simple and good, and I had just placed a landmine right in the middle of it. The hours dragged. I was a ghost moving through my own home. I jumped at every car that passed. When my phone rang with an unknown number, I nearly screamed. It was a telemarketer. I was fraying at the edges. By bedtime, I had a plan. A terrible, cowardly plan. I would go to the church in the morning. I would take the money. I would confess to Pastor Mike, beg for mercy, and return every cent. I would cry, and maybe he would see how broken I was and choose compassion. I rehearsed the speech in my head as I read Caleb a bedtime story, my voice on autopilot, and the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. The irony was a bitter pill. Caleb prayed his simple prayers for his friends, for his goldfish, for Grandma. He didn't pray for his mom, who was too ashamed to kneel beside his bed. I kissed his forehead, my lips lingering. "I love you, my boy," I whispered, the words thick. "No matter what happens, I love you. I love you too, Mom. Are you sick?" "Your voice sounds funny." "Just tired," I said. I walked out, leaving his door slightly ajar, and went to the living room window. I peered through the blinds into the dark street. Was that a car parked farther down with someone inside? My paranoia was a living thing. I needed to talk to someone. Not to confess, but just to hear a human voice that wasn't screaming at me inside my head. I scrolled through my contacts. My parents lived in Florida. I couldn't bear to tell them. My friend Amanda from Bible study? She'd be horrified. I landed on a name. Lisa Carter. Lisa was my oldest friend, from before church. Before Mark. She was a nurse, pragmatic, funny, and didn't go to church herself. She loved me, but she'd never understood the God stuff, as she called it. Right now, that seemed like a safe distance. I called her. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Shar! Hey, what's up?" Just hearing her voice unlocked something. A choked sound escaped me. "Sharon? Honey, what's wrong?" "Lisa, I've done something terrible." The words tumbled out in a ragged whisper. I didn't give details. I said I'd taken something that wasn't mine from the church, that I was caught, that I was so scared. There was a long silence on the other end. I braced for judgment, for shock. Instead, she let out a soft sigh. "Oh, sweetie. Aren't you going to tell me how stupid I am?" I asked, crying properly now. "Would it help?" she said, her voice gentle but firm. "It sounds like you already know. Listen to me. The only way out of this is through it. You have to give it back and face the music. Whatever that music is. They might call the police. They might," she said, not sugarcoating it. "But running or hiding will make it 1,000 times worse. For you and for Caleb." She was speaking the truth I already knew, but hearing it from outside my own spiraling thoughts gave it weight. We talked for a few more minutes. She offered to come over, but I said no, I just needed to hear it. Before we hung up, she said, "For what it's worth, I still love you. Even now. Remember that." Her words were a tiny raft in the ocean of my shame, but they weren't enough to calm the storm. I didn't sleep. I lay rigid beside the hidden envelope, listening to every creak of the apartment building. I prayed, but the prayers were just frantic. Silent pleas, "Please, please, please make this go away. Don't let Caleb see this. I'll do anything." Morning came, gray and heavy. I got Caleb ready for school, my hands shaking as I packed his lunch. "You sure you're okay, Mom?" he asked, his little face pinched with concern. "I've got a big meeting today," I said, which wasn't a lie. "Just nervous." I put him on the bus, watching the yellow rectangle until it turned the corner. My safety window was closing. I had to move. I went back inside, pulled the envelope from under the mattress, and put it in my tote bag. I drove to Rockford Community Church. The steeple, usually a comforting sight, looked accusatory against the flat, cloudy sky. The parking lot was empty except for Pastor Mike's old sedan and Deacon Johnson's pickup truck. They were waiting. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, gripping the steering wheel. This was my chance to drive away, to take the money and just disappear. Start over somewhere, but Lisa's voice echoed. "It will make it 1,000 times worse for Caleb." I forced myself out of the car, my legs like water. I walked to the side door that led to the offices. My hand hovered over the handle. I took one deep, shuddering breath, begging for a courage I did not have. I opened the door. The hallway was quiet. I could hear low voices coming from Pastor Mike's office. I stepped forward, my tote bag feeling like it was filled with lead. I was halfway down the hall when the office door opened. It wasn't Pastor Mike or Deacon Johnson who stepped out. It was a uniformed police officer, a man in his 40s with a solemn face and a heavy belt laden with equipment. His eyes locked onto mine immediately. Behind him, I saw Pastor Mike, his face pale and grief-stricken. Deacon Johnson stood beside him, looking at the floor. The officer took a step toward me. "Sharon Mendez?" he asked, his voice formal and final. My vision tunneled. The plan, the speech, the begging for mercy, it all evaporated. The consequences had arrived, and they were wearing a badge. I nodded, a tiny, pathetic movement. "I need you to come with me, ma'am," he said. He didn't yell. He didn't handcuff me, not then. But his presence was a cold, hard line drawn under the last chapter of my life as I knew it. This was no longer a church matter. This was the law. Pastor Mike took a step forward, his hand outstretched as if to stop everything. His mouth open to say something forgiveness or condemnation. I'll never know. The officer gently held up a hand. "Please, Pastor, we need to do this by the book." He guided me, not roughly, back down the hall I had just walked. Out into the glaring, indifferent daylight of the parking lot, toward his squad car. I didn't look back. I couldn't. The envelope, still in my bag, was now evidence. The chance to return it willingly was gone. I had waited too long. As I lowered myself into the back of the patrol car, the vinyl seat crackling under me, the first true, overwhelming wave of despair crashed over me. I was not going to Pastor Mike's office for a difficult conversation. I was under arrest. And in that moment, as the officer closed the door with a solid metallic thunk, sealing me inside, I believed, with every shattered piece of my soul, that even God couldn't reach me here. The door closed behind the officer, leaving me alone in the interrogation room again. The silence was louder than any noise. It was the sound of my old life ending. I stared at the scratched metal table, at my own reflection warped in its surface. I looked like a stranger, pale, hollow-eyed. My hair a mess from running my hands through it. I kept thinking about Caleb. What would they tell him? When would he see me again? The thought of him coming home to an empty apartment, to a neighbor or a police officer explaining where his mom was, made a physical pain shoot through my chest. I doubled over, arms wrapped around my stomach, but no tears came. I was too empty for tears. I don't know how long I sat there. Time in that room had no meaning. It was measured only in heartbeats of dread. Finally, the door opened again. It was Pastor Mike. He came in alone, carrying a simple wooden chair from the hallway. The officer stood just outside, leaving the door open a few inches. A silent reminder that this was not a pastoral visit. This was a supervised conversation in a police station. Pastor Mike set the chair across from me and sat down slowly. He looked older than he had on Sunday. The lines around his eyes were deeper. He placed his hands on the table, palms down. He didn't speak for a long moment, just looked at me. His gaze wasn't furious. It was searching, sad, weary. "Sharon," he said finally. His voice was hoarse. I couldn't meet his eyes. I focused on his hands, the wedding band, a small scar across his knuckle. Hands that had baptized Caleb, that had broken communion bread. Hands I had betrayed. "I'm sorry," I whispered. The words were dust. "I'm so sorry, Pastor Mike." "The money was in your bag," he said, not as a question, but a quiet, awful statement of fact. I nodded, still looking down. I was going to bring it back this morning, I swear I was. But you didn't. You were coming to the church, but you didn't bring it to my house last night. You didn't call me the minute you got home yesterday and realized you had it." His tone wasn't accusing. It was just relentlessly factual. He was making me see the timeline of my own deceit. "The camera showed you putting it in your bag, Sharon. It showed you locking the empty drawer. It showed you walking out." Each sentence was a hammer blow. There was no defense. "I know," I mumbled. "Why?" The question cracked out of him, filled with a confusion that seemed genuinely pained. "Sharon, of all people, why? If you were in trouble, why didn't you come to us?" "To me? The Deacon's Fund is there for help. We've helped others. We would have helped you." That was the salt in the wound. The kindness I had rejected, the provision I had stolen instead of asking for. My shame curdled into a sudden sharp anger at myself, at Mark for leaving, at the bills, at a God who let things get this hard, because I was ashamed. The words burst out of me, and I finally looked up, ashamed that my husband left, ashamed that I couldn't keep the lights on, ashamed to be the broken one needing the help when I'm supposed to be the one serving, the one who has it together. Everyone looks to me at church. "Oh, Sharon's so strong. Sharon manages so well." It was a lie. My voice broke. "I'm drowning and I was too proud to yell for help, so I just reached for what I thought would keep me afloat." The anger vanished as quickly as it came, leaving me deflated. "I didn't plan it." I saw the envelope and it was like this door opened. A terrible, easy door. And I walked right through. Pastor Mike listened. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, his eyes glistening. He looked up at the ceiling for a moment, as if searching for the right words there. "The police have to press charges," he said softly, looking back at me. "It's not my decision anymore. The camera footage, it's evidence. The amount is over a certain threshold. It's a felony, Sharon." The word felony hung in the air between us. It meant a permanent record. It meant trying to explain this to future employers. It meant my son's mother was a felon. A fresh wave of nausea rolled over me. "But," he continued, leaning forward again, "Deacon Johnson and we've already spoken to the detective. We've made it very clear that we, as the victims," he stumbled on the word, "we have no desire for vengeance. We want restoration. We've asked them to consider that. The money is recovered entirely. That matters. A tiny, fragile spark of something, not hope, but maybe the absence of utter despair flickered in me. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice small. "They'll process you. You'll be formally charged. There will be a bail hearing. Probably tomorrow." He rubbed his forehead. "Do you have a lawyer?" I gave a short, bitter laugh. "I can't afford a lawyer, Pastor Mike." I couldn't afford my electric bill. He nodded, as if he'd expected that. The church will cover a bail bondsman, if bail is set, and we'll find you a lawyer. A good one. I stared at him, bewildered. Why? Why would you do that? After what I did? For the first time, a faint, sorrowful smile touched his lips. Because it's what we're supposed to do, he said simply. You've committed a crime against the church, yes, but you are still a member of the body. A sick member, a broken member, but still a member. We don't amputate. We try to heal. His words should have been comforting. Instead, they felt like a weight I didn't deserve. His kindness was a mirror, showing me the full ugliness of what I'd done. The congregation, I whispered. Everyone will know. They'll know, he confirmed, not softening it. There's no hiding this. And it will hurt people, Sharon. It will shake their trust. It will cause a lot of pain. That's part of the consequence you'll have to face. But, he sighed, maybe it will also remind them that we're all just one bad decision away from needing grace. Myself included. He stood up, the chair legs scraping on the floor. I'm gonna go call Lisa Carter. She listed herself as your emergency contact a long time ago on a form. She's on her way to get Caleb from school. He'll stay with her tonight. Tears finally welled up, hot and blurring. Lisa. She dropped everything. Thank you, I choked out. Pastor Mike walked to the door. He paused, his hand on the knob. He didn't turn around. Sharon, he said, his voice low. In my office after you left on Sunday, I found something on the floor under the desk. It was a little card. A prayer card from the women's retreat last year. It had your name on the back, and you'd written a verse. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Psalm 51:10. I remembered that card. I'd kept it in my Bible. It must have fallen out when I upended my bag. I've been praying that verse for you since I found it, he said. I didn't know why then. I think I do now. He opened the door. I'll be praying it for you still. He left, and the officer came back in. The moment of raw, painful humanity was over. The system took over again. Stand up, please, he said. It was time for the next step, fingerprints, photographs, the cold mechanics of justice. As I stood, my body moving on command, my mind clung to two things. Caleb was with Lisa. He was safe. And somewhere, Pastor Mike was praying for my filthy heart to be made clean, in that sterile, shame-filled room. Those two facts felt like the only things holding me together. But the process ahead was a dark tunnel, and I couldn't see any light at the end of it. I was entering the machine, and I had no idea what would be left of me when it finally spat me out. The processing was a blur of humiliating routine. Fingerprints rolled in black ink, the cold press of each finger against the card. A digital camera flashed, capturing my mugshot, the definitive portrait of Sharon Mendez, felon. They took my bag, my shoelaces, my belt. The female officer with the tired eyes guided me to a holding cell. This one larger than the first, with a stainless steel toilet in the corner and a bench along the wall. Another woman was already there, younger than me, staring vacantly at the opposite wall. We didn't speak. The door clanged shut with a sound of terrible finality. I sat on the bench, the cold seeping through again. I replayed Pastor Mike's words. We don't amputate. We try to heal. They felt like a life raft thrown from a ship I had already torpedoed. Could I even grab it? Did I deserve to? Hours passed. A uniformed officer brought 2 trays of bland food, some kind of meatloaf and overcooked green beans. I couldn't touch it. The other woman ate hers quickly, mechanically. The light in the high, small window faded from gray to black. Night in a cell. I thought of Caleb eating dinner at Lisa's table. Was he scared? Was he crying? Lisa would be kind, but she'd also be honest in a way he could understand. Your mom made a big mistake, and she has to fix it with the police. The truth, but a 7-year-old's version of it. I prayed he wasn't blaming himself. I prayed he still felt loved. Sometime deep in the night, a different officer came to the door. Mendez, your lawyer's here for a consult. He led me to a small, windowless room. A man in a slightly rumpled suit stood up. He was in his late 40s, with kind, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and hair that was thinning on top. Miss Mendez, I'm Brian Cooper. Pastor Mike and the church retained me for you. He shook my hand, his grip firm and brief. Please, sit. I sat, suddenly aware of my disheveled appearance, the smell of fear and concrete on me. Thank you for coming, I mumbled. Let's talk facts, not feelings for now, he said, opening a folder. You're charged with felony theft over $500. The evidence is, frankly, overwhelming. The security footage is clear. The money was recovered in your possession. You have no prior record. The victims, the church leadership, are advocating for leniency and are more interested in restitution and rehabilitation than punishment. These are all significant points in your favor. He looked at me over his glasses. At your arraignment tomorrow, you will be formally charged and asked to enter a plea. Given the circumstances, I recommend we plead not guilty initially. It's a procedural move that gives us time to negotiate with the prosecutor for a plea deal, likely a reduced charge, maybe a misdemeanor, with conditions like community service, counseling, and full restitution already being satisfied. A plea deal? The term was from TV shows. It means you would agree to admit guilt to a lesser charge in exchange for the more serious charge being dropped. It avoids a trial. Given the evidence, a trial would not be advisable. He said it gently. The goal here is to minimize the long-term impact on your life, especially for your son's sake. Caleb. It always came back to him. My actions were a stone thrown in a pond, and the ripples were about to hit his shore. What kind of conditions? Possibly probation for a period of time. A theft diversion program. The judge will also want to see that you have stable housing and employment. He paused. Do you have a job to go back to? The library. My part-time, barely making ends meet job. Mrs. Ellis, the head librarian, was a stern, proper woman who attended a different church. Would she keep a thief on staff? Doubt constricted my throat. I don't know. We'll cross that bridge later, Brian said, making a note. For now, focus on the hearing tomorrow. The church has posted bail. It's set at $5,000. They're covering the bondsman's fee. You'll be released after processing tomorrow morning, assuming the judge doesn't revoke it. You'll go home, but you cannot leave the county. You cannot contact any members of the church except Pastor Mike or Deacon Johnson, as they are the named victims. Do you understand? I nodded. Going home. The thought was both a desperate longing and a source of new dread. Home was where all the problems waited, now compounded by a tsunami of shame. Any questions? Brian asked, closing his folder. Why are they doing this? The question burst out. Paying for a lawyer, for bail, after what I did? Brian took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly on his tie. Miss Mendez, in my line of work, I see a lot of hypocrisy. I see a lot of people pretending to be something they're not. What your church is doing? It's unusual. It's costing them real money and creating real awkwardness for them. In my experience, people don't do that unless they genuinely believe in something bigger than the crime. He put his glasses back on. I can't speak to what that is, but I'd suggest you don't look a gift horse in the mouth. Use the grace they're offering to get your feet under you. Grace. It was the second time that word had been used in connection with me today. It didn't feel like a gift. It felt like a debt I could never repay. The night was endless. I dozed fitfully on the hard bench, jerking awake at every sound, my mind racing with nightmares both sleeping and waking. When the first gray light of dawn seeped into the cell, I felt more exhausted than when I'd lain down. The morning routine was reversed. I got my belongings back. I was given my belt and shoelaces. An officer escorted me to the courthouse, which was connected to the jail by a tunnel. Everything was linoleum and echoing footsteps, and the low murmur of anxious people. The courtroom was wood-paneled and imposing. Brian Cooper met me there, giving me a reassuring nod. Pastor Mike and Deacon Johnson sat in the front row of the spectator benches. They didn't smile, but Pastor Mike met my eyes and gave a single, slow nod. Lisa was there too. In the back, and seeing her familiar, worried face was like a gulp of air. She had Caleb. I knew it. He was safe. The judge, a severe-looking woman with silver hair, called my case. The charges were read. My voice was a dry rasp as I uttered, "Not guilty," just as Brian had instructed. The bail conditions were confirmed. It was over in minutes. You are released on your own recognizance, subject to the stated conditions, the judge said, peering at me over her glasses. Use this time wisely, Miss Mendez. The court will be watching. And then, just like that, I was free to go. The institutional doors swung shut behind me, and I stood on the courthouse steps, squinting in the morning sun. The normal world cars, people walking to work, a bird singing in a tree seemed violently bright and strange. I felt branded, as if everyone passing could see "Thief" stamped on my forehead. Lisa's car pulled up to the curb. She got out and without a word, wrapped me in a fierce hug. She smelled like her familiar lavender laundry detergent and coffee. Okay, she said into my hair. Okay, you're out. Let's get you home. On the drive to my apartment, she filled me in. Caleb was with her mom for the day. He's confused, but he's okay. He just wants you. I told him you had to take care of some grown-up problems. She glanced at me. He asked if you were in jail. I said yes, but that you were coming home. Kids understand more than we think. My apartment was exactly as I'd left it, yet completely different. It was the scene of the crime, the place where I'd made the decision to steal and then to hide. The silence was accusing. Lisa made tea, the familiar clatter of mugs a small anchor. What do you need, Sharon? She asked, sitting across from me at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd opened the disconnect notice. I don't know, I said honestly. I have to call my job. I have to figure out everything. As if on cue, my phone, now charged, buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. Sharon, it's Amanda, from Bible study. I just heard. I'm praying for you. Before I could process it, another came in. This is Karen Larson. We need to talk. Call me. The Larson family. Their $50 cookie money. The walls were closing in. The private shame was about to become public spectacle. My phone buzzed again, this time with a call. It was Mrs. Ellis, from the library. Lisa, I whispered, my blood running cold. It's starting. I answered the phone. Mrs. Ellis's voice was like polished granite, smooth and hard. Sharon, I've received a rather disturbing call from a deacon at your church. She didn't need to say more. The silence on the line was filled with the words she wasn't saying. Thief, arrest, felony. I can explain, I began. The phrase pathetic even to my own ears. There's no need, she interrupted, her tone final. The library board has a strict morality clause for all staff, particularly those who handle fines and cash registers. While we appreciate your past service, we cannot have someone with pending theft charges representing our institution. Your final check will be mailed. Please do not come to collect your personal items. We will box them and they can be picked up from security. Goodbye, Sharon. The dial tone buzzed in my ear. I lowered the phone to the table, the click of it on the formica sounding like a judge's gavel. Jobless. With a court case hanging over me and a son to support, Lisa, watching my face, reached over and squeezed my hand. I'm sorry, Shar. It's what I deserve, I said flatly. The truth of it was a heavy, dull weight. Maybe, Lisa said, never one for false comfort. But deserving it doesn't make it easier to bear. She stood up. I have to get to my shift at the hospital. Caleb's at my mom's. I'll bring him by after dinner, okay? That'll give you the day to process. After she left, the silence of the apartment roared. I was adrift. The structure of my life, work, church, being a mom, had been a fragile shell, and now it was shattered. I mechanically cleaned the already clean kitchen. I avoided the living room window, paranoid that a neighbor would point. My phone continued to buzz intermittently, more texts from church people. Some were simple, praying for you. Others were confused, hurt. How could you? One, from Karen Larson, was just a link to a Bible verse. Luke 19:8, where Zacchaeus promises to repay fourfold what he stole. The message was clear. The weight of it all pressed down until I couldn't breathe inside the walls. I needed air, even if the world judged me. I pulled on a hoodie, kept my head down, and walked to the small park at the end of our street. It was a weekday morning, empty except for an elderly man walking a slow dog. I sat on a swing meant for children, my feet planted in the wood chips, and just stared at the gray bark of an oak tree. What now, God? The prayer was less a petition and more a stunned, empty-handed shrug. I've ruined everything. I've hurt everyone. I've failed Caleb. What are you going to do with this mess? I didn't expect an answer. I felt too far away. My faith had always been in doing, serving, teaching, showing up. Now that I had nothing to do and was someone I never wanted to be, what was left? A memory surfaced, unbidden. My grandmother. Years ago. Wiping my tears after I'd broken her favorite vase trying to steal a cookie from the high shelf. Child, she'd said, her knobby finger under my chin. You can't fix the broken pieces by hiding them. You bring them to me. We'll see what we can make of it. We'd glued the vase back together. The cracks were always visible, but it held flowers for years after. I was a collection of broken pieces now. And hiding was what got me here. When my phone rang, I jumped. It was Brian Cooper, the lawyer. Sharon, we have a meeting with the prosecutor tomorrow afternoon at 3. It's the first step toward a plea deal. I need you to be thinking about what you want to say. This isn't about legal arguments. It's about showing remorse and taking responsibility. Can you do that? Yes, I said, my voice rough from disuse. I can do that. Good. Also, Pastor Mike called me. The church council wants to meet with you. It's not a legal thing. It's a disciplinary and pastoral process. They've scheduled it for Thursday night. My stomach clenched. Facing the law was one thing. Facing the people I'd sung hymns with, served coffee to, lied to, that was a different kind of terror. Do I have to? No, Brian said. But it would likely be viewed very favorably by the court if you voluntarily participate in the church's restorative process. It shows you're engaging with the community you harmed. I agreed, my mouth dry. The path forward was becoming a series of awful, necessary rooms I had to walk into. That evening, Lisa brought Caleb home. He burst through the door and ran to me, wrapping his small arms around my waist so tightly it hurt. Mom, you're back! I knelt down, holding him, breathing in the smell of his hair. I'm back, baby. I searched his face for fear, for anger. I saw mostly relief, tinged with confusion. Aunt Lisa said you made a big mistake with some money from church. That's right, I did, and it was very wrong. Are you going to go away again? The question was whispered, his biggest fear laid bare. I cupped his face. I might have to go to some meetings with the judge, and I might have some consequences, but I am not leaving you, okay? I am right here. He nodded, wanting to believe me. Lisa stayed for a while, helping with homework. A steady, non-judgmental presence. After Caleb was in bed, I walked her to the door. You'll get through this, she said firmly. How do you know? I asked, desperate for her certainty. Because you have to, she said. The next day, I put on the only nice clothes I owned, a simple navy dress I used to wear to church, and met Brian at the county attorney's office. The prosecutor was a sharp-eyed woman named Angela Vance. The room was all business. Brian did most of the talking, outlining the church's desire for restoration, my lack of record, my immediate family hardship. Miss Vance listened, then turned her gaze to me. Miss Mendez, why should this office offer you a deal? The evidence is incontrovertible. You stole from a place of trust. You violated the law and the goodwill of your community. This was my moment. I folded my trembling hands in my lap. Because I am guilty, I said, forcing myself to meet her eyes. There's no excuse. I was prideful and desperate, and I made a terrible choice. I am ready to accept whatever punishment the court thinks is fair. My voice wavered. I want to make it right as it can be made. I want to pay back what I stole. Not just the money, but the trust. I know that will take a long time. If a deal gives me the chance to do that, to stay with my son and work and prove I'm more than this one awful decision, then I am begging you for that chance. The room was quiet. Miss Vance studied me for a long moment, then looked at Brian. We're prepared to reduce the charge to misdemeanor theft, with 2 years of probation, 200 hours of community service to be served at a nonprofit other than the church, and mandatory financial counseling. She must also write a letter of apology to the church congregation, to be approved by both Pastor Mike and this office. Full restitution is considered made. It was better than I dared hope. A misdemeanor. Probation, not jail. Brian nudged me under the table. Thank you, I said. I accept. The judge will make the final ruling at your sentencing hearing next month, Miss Vance said, gathering her papers. Stay out of trouble. Don't so much as jaywalk. On the drive home, Brian was cautiously optimistic. This is a good outcome, Sharon. A gift, really. Now, the church meeting. That's the next hurdle. Thursday night arrived like a storm cloud. I asked Lisa to stay with Caleb. I drove to the church, my hands slick on the steering wheel. The building looked different at night, shadows pooling in the doorway. I went not to the main entrance but to the basement fellowship hall where council meetings were held. Around a long table sat 7 people. Pastor Mike, Deacon Johnson, Amanda, my friend from Bible study, Karen Larson, and 3 others, elders I knew and respected. The air was thick with a tension that was both formal and deeply personal. Pastor Mike gestured to an empty chair facing the table. I sat, feeling like a defendant again. Sharon, he began, his voice solemn. This is a meeting of church discipline, but its purpose is not to punish. It is to discern the truth, to allow for confession, to counsel you toward repentance, and to protect the church. We will each speak, and then you will have a chance to speak. What followed was the most painful hour of my life. One by one, they described the hurt. Deacon Johnson spoke of feeling foolish for his trust. Karen Larson cried as she described her children working so hard on their cookie fundraiser, wanting to help God's house, and how she now had to explain where that money went. Amanda's voice was thick with betrayal. I told you about my struggles with my credit card debt, she said, and you listened. And you prayed with me. But you never said you were drowning too. We could have helped. Why didn't you let us help? Their words were arrows, each one hitting its mark. I didn't defend myself. I just listened. Tears streaming silently down my face, saying, I'm sorry, after each one, the words becoming more inadequate each time. When they finished, Pastor Mike looked at me. Sharon, do you have anything to say? I took a shuddering breath. I have listened to your hurt, and it is worse than I imagined. I can give you reasons, but they aren't excuses. I was prideful. I was scared. I was selfish. I sinned against you, and against God. I don't expect your trust back. I don't deserve it. All I can do is ask for your forgiveness, and promise that with God's help, I will spend a long time trying to live differently. To be honest, even when it's humiliating, to ask for help even when I'm ashamed. There was a long silence. Then Deacon Johnson, his old voice gentle, said, We forgive you, Sharon, as we are forgiven by Christ. But forgiveness is not the same as pretending nothing happened. There will be consequences within this family too. Pastor Mike outlined them. I was removed from all positions of service, no Sunday school, no offering counting, no volunteering. I was not to take communion for a period of 3 months, a time of focused reflection. I was expected to attend church regularly, but would sit with Lisa or in the back, and I was to meet weekly with Pastor Mike for discipleship and accountability. This is for your healing as much as ours, Pastor Mike said. To rebuild on a foundation of truth, not image. I accepted it all. It was merciful, and it was just. As the meeting adjourned, Karen Larson walked around the table. She stopped in front of me, her eyes red-rimmed. My heart hammered. Then, she simply opened her arms. After a stunned second, I stepped into her hug. It was stiff at first, then she held me tighter. We love you, Sharon, she whispered. Even now. Especially now. But it hurts. I know, I cried into her shoulder. I'm so sorry. Driving home, I felt scraped raw, hollowed out. But the heavy, secret poison was gone. It was out in the open. The consequences were real and stretching out for years, but they were known. I wasn't hiding anymore. When I walked into my apartment, Lisa was reading on the couch. Caleb was asleep. How did it go? She asked. It was awful, I said, sinking into a chair. And it was right. I looked at her. They forgave me. It's going to be a long road, but they forgave me. Lisa nodded, a small smile on her face. Good. Now, the practical stuff. You need a job. I talked to the charge nurse on my floor. The hospital cafeteria is hiring for the morning shift, bussing tables and cleaning. It's hard work, and it's early. But it's off by 2 p.m., so you're here for Caleb after school. The pay is okay. And, she added, they hire people with records. I already set up an interview for you on Monday. A job, a chance. A friend who acted when I could not. It was a quiet, tangible mercy in the rubble of my life. That night, for the first time since the envelope entered my bag, I slept a deep, dreamless sleep. Not because my problems were solved, but because I was no longer carrying them alone. But as I drifted off, a cold thought whispered. Sentencing was still to come. A judge would have the final say, and the world outside the church was not obligated to forgive. The hospital cafeteria smelled of steamed vegetables, industrial cleaner, and faintly, of sickness. My uniform was a pair of stiff, blue scrubs and comfortable shoes Lisa had loaned me. My hands, by the end of the first shift, were raw from hot water and sanitizer. I bussed tables, wiped down trays, and mopped floors under the fluorescent lights from 5:30 a.m. until 2 p.m. It was humbling, monotonous work. I was invisible to most of the doctors and nurses who grabbed coffee, and overly visible to the patients in robes who shuffled through with their IV poles, a reminder of the world of illness and worry that existed alongside my own personal disaster. But it was a job. It paid. And there was a brutal honesty to it. No one here expected me to be strong Sharon from church. I was just the new girl on the cleaning detail. My supervisor, a no-nonsense woman named Rita, with forearms like a wrestler, showed me the ropes without pity or curiosity. Just do the work, don't steal, and we'll get along, she'd said, not knowing how deeply that last instruction cut. The hardest part was the hours. I had to leave before Caleb woke up. Lisa would come over, sleep on our couch, and get him ready for school. It felt like another failure, another way I wasn't there for him. The first morning I crept out in the dark. I stood by his bed and watched him sleep, his chest rising and falling, and the guilt was a physical ache. My weekly meetings with Pastor Mike were on Wednesday afternoons in his office, the same room where it had all happened. The first time back, I froze in the doorway. The camera dome was still there. The desk drawer was just a drawer. It's okay, Pastor Mike said gently. Come in. We didn't talk much about the theft itself at first. He asked about Caleb. He asked about the job. He asked how I was sleeping. It felt like a doctor checking vital signs. Then he'd open his Bible and we'd just read. Not verses about theft or punishment, but about weariness, about mercy that was new every morning. One week, we read about Peter, who swore he'd never deny Jesus, and then did it 3 times before the rooster crowed. He thought his love was stronger than his fear, Pastor Mike said. He was wrong, and Jesus met him in that failure and built the church on him anyway. That got to me. The great Peter, a denier. Yet Jesus didn't discard him. He rehabilitated him. Do you think someone like me can be used again? I asked, my voice small. I think God specializes in cracked pots, he said. The light shines through the broken places. But Sharon, it's not about being used. It's about being healed. Focus on that. One afternoon, about 3 weeks into the job, I was cleaning tables in the far corner of the cafeteria. Most of the lunch rush was over. An elderly man in a patient gown was sitting alone, pushing peas around his plate. He looked up as I wiped the table next to him. He had kind, watery blue eyes and a head of fluffy white hair. You're new, he said, his voice reedy. Yes, sir, just started a few weeks ago. He nodded slowly. It's good work, important. Keeping things clean. He looked down at his peas. I don't have much appetite. You want my Jell-O? It's red. I'm not going to eat it. It was such a small, grandfatherly gesture. Oh. No thank you, sir. You should try to eat. He smiled faintly. Suit yourself. You seem like you've got a weight on you, young lady. I paused, clutching my damp rag. Could he see it? Was it that obvious? Just a long day, I managed. He said, not convinced. You know, I've been in and out of this place for my heart. Seen a lot of people come through here. The ones who carry their weight alone. They stoop. The ones who share it. They walk a little lighter. He pushed the cup of red Jell-O toward the edge of his tray. Sure you don't want it? I took the Jell-O. Thank you. As I picked it up, my sleeve rode up slightly, revealing the edge of the tattoo on my wrist, A tiny cross I'd gotten in college, a lifetime ago. His eyes caught it. "Ah," he said softly. "Well then. You already know who to share the weight with, don't you? Even when it feels like he's not listening." Tears pricked my eyes. This stranger in a hospital gown was pastoring me in a cafeteria. "It's hard to talk to someone you know you've disappointed," I whispered. "Oh, child," he said, his voice full of a sudden gentle authority. "That's exactly who he's waiting for. The disappointments. The deniers. The folks who messed up big. The other sons." "The other sons?" He leaned back. "The story of the prodigal. Everyone focuses on the runaway. I always felt bad for the son who stayed home. He thought his value was in never messing up. He missed the whole point. The party wasn't for perfect behavior. It was for a heart that came home." He patted my hand where it rested on the table. "Come home. However you need to. He's watching the road for you." Before I could say anything, a nurse came to collect him for a test. He gave me a little wave as he was wheeled away. I never saw him again. I never even knew his name. But his words, "Come home," echoed in me for days. They felt like an invitation to a place I wasn't sure I was allowed to enter anymore. At home, Caleb was withdrawing. He was quiet. He'd stopped asking about church, about when we were going back. He'd just play with his Legos in his room for hours. One night, as I was tucking him in, he asked, "Mom, are we bad people now?" The question was a knife to the heart. "Oh, honey, no. I made a very bad choice. But that doesn't make me a bad person. And it definitely doesn't make you a bad person. You are good and kind and loved. Billy Miller at school said his mom says you're a criminal and I shouldn't play with him anymore." The world tilted. I had braced for my own shame, not his. I pulled him close. "I am so sorry, Caleb. That must have hurt so much. Billy's mom is upset about what I did, and she's trying to protect her family. That's what moms do. But her being upset doesn't mean you are not wonderful and worthy of friends." I kissed his head. "We are going to get through this, I promise." But my promise felt fragile. The consequences were spilling over onto my innocent boy, and there was nothing I could do to shield him. It was the worst punishment of all. The sentencing hearing was now 2 weeks away. Brian Cooper had me practice my statement to the judge. Short, sincere, no excuses, he said. I wrote it out over and over, but the words felt dead on the page. Then, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from the Rockford Community Church, but it wasn't a bill or an official notice. It was a simple card. On the front was a picture of a rough stone path. Inside, in dozens of different handwritings, were messages. "Sharon, we're praying for peace for you and Caleb. The Johnson family. Therefore, there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus." Romans 8:1. "We love you. Amanda." My kids asked if we could still give to the building fund. I said yes, because God's work isn't stopped by our mistakes. We're giving again this week. Karen, page after page of them. Short, simple messages of care. Not sweeping declarations that everything was fine, but acknowledgments that I was still part of the family, even from a distance. It was the tangible evidence of the no amputation Pastor Mike had spoken of. I cried for an hour. The card held to my chest. The night before the sentencing hearing, I couldn't practice my statement anymore. I sat at the kitchen table, the card before me, and I just prayed a raw, messy prayer. No fancy words, just, "God, I am scared. I am so sorry. Please be with Caleb. Please let the judge see that I'm trying. I'm coming home. Help me." I walked to Caleb's doorway. He was asleep, his stuffed dog under his arm. I whispered, "I will do better. I will be better. For you." The morning of the hearing, I put on the same navy dress. Lisa came to drive me, her presence a steady silence. As we walked into the courthouse, my legs were weak. We entered the same courtroom as before. This time, it was fuller. Pastor Mike was there, Deacon Johnson, Amanda, Karen Larson, a whole row of people from church. They hadn't come to see me condemned. They had come to be there. The judge entered. We all rose. My fate was in her hands. Brian gave his arguments. The prosecutor, Miss Vance, stated the terms of the plea deal. Then the judge looked at me. "Miss Mendez, you have the opportunity to address the court. I stood up, my notes trembling in my hand. I looked at the words I'd written, then, at the faces of the people from my church. I thought of the old man in the hospital, and his jello. I set the paper down on the table. I looked at the judge. Your Honor, I began, my voice shaky but clear. I am guilty. I stole from my church, from my friends, from people who trusted me. I have no excuse. I can only say I am profoundly sorry, and that I am committed to living a life of honesty and restitution. The mercy shown to me by the church and by this court has been a gift I don't deserve. I am asking for the chance to prove, through probation and community service, that I can be a trustworthy person again. Thank you. I sat down. The judge adjusted her glasses, looking over the file. The courtroom was utterly still. My entire future, and Caleb's, hung in the balance of her next words. But instead of pronouncing sentence, she looked past me. To the gallery. I see several members of the community have come. Is there a representative who wishes to speak? Pastor Mike stood up. I am Pastor Michael Reynolds, Your Honor. May I approach? The judge nodded. Pastor Mike walked to the front, sworn in, and stood beside Brian. Pastor Reynolds, the judge said, your church is the victim in this case. What is your position on this plea agreement? Pastor Mike took a deep breath. Your Honor, we support it fully. Sharon Mendez has confessed, made full restitution, and submitted to the discipline of our church community. We believe the proposed sentence allows for both accountability and the possibility of restoration. She is a single mother. Incarceration would only further fracture a family that is already struggling. We, as the ones wronged, believe justice is best served by her being in the community, working, caring for her son, and rebuilding her life on better ground. The judge listened, her expression unreadable. She then asked if anyone else wished to speak. To my shock, Karen Larson stood up. She spoke briefly, her voice strong. It hurt us, Your Honor, deeply, but we forgive her. The judge dismissed them back to their seats. She looked at me for a long, tense moment, then down at her papers. She began to speak, detailing the legal sentence, but my mind was scrambling to process it all, and then she said a phrase that made my blood run cold. However, given the nature of the crime, a breach of sacred trust, I am not fully convinced the proposed sentence is sufficient deterrent. She paused, her eyes sharp on mine. The room seemed to hold its breath. The grace I had been shown by the church, by the prosecutor, was it about to be overruled here? In this final, decisive moment? The judge's words hung in the air, sharp as a blade. Not fully convinced the proposed sentence is sufficient deterrent. My breath stopped. Brian Cooper stiffened beside me. I could feel the dismay ripple through the row of people from church behind me. This was it. The mercy was about to be snatched back. The cold bench of the holding cell seemed to materialize beneath me again. Judge Silver leaned forward, her gaze piercing. The court takes breaches of fiduciary trust with the utmost seriousness, Miss Mendez. Whether it's a bank or a place of worship, the damage to the social fabric is the same. A misdemeanor and probation for a planned theft of nearly $3,000 seems lenient. Prosecutor Vance stood up. Your Honor, while we share the court's concern, the state's offer was based on the full restitution, the lack of prior record, the genuine cooperation of the victim who is advocating for this outcome, and the fact that incarceration would place a disproportionate burden on a minor child who is entirely innocent in this matter. The judge held up a hand, silencing her. She looked at me again. Miss Mendez, your pastor and your victims speak of forgiveness and restoration. That is commendable of them. But this court must also consider the message it sends. That if you are well liked, if your victims are forgiving, the consequences are lighter. Do you understand that concern? My mouth was desert dry. I forced myself to stand again. Yes, Your Honor, I do. What would you say to someone watching this who might think, I can steal from my community, and if I cry and apologize, I'll just get a slap on the wrist? It was the hardest question yet. It wasn't about my pain, or Caleb's. It was about justice, plain and simple. I thought of the shame, the lost job, the look in my son's eyes, the long road of probation and apology still ahead. I thought of the invisible brand I would wear forever. I would say, I began, my voice trembling but gaining strength, that the slap on the wrist is the least of it. Losing the trust of everyone you know, that's a prison no one sentences you to. You build it yourself, every day. When you see the hurt in the eyes of people who believed in you, the legal punishment, it's just the outline of the hole you've already dug for your life. I have to live in that hole, Your Honor, and figure out how to climb out. With my son watching, I don't think anyone seeing that would think it's a light consequence. The courtroom was silent. Judge Silver's expression didn't change, but she held my gaze for a long moment, then looked down at her papers. She shuffled them. The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Very well, she said finally. The court accepts the plea agreement to the reduced charge of misdemeanor theft. Relief, so potent it felt dizzying, began to flood me. But she wasn't finished. However, I am adding additional conditions to your probation. Standard drug testing will apply, of course. Furthermore, you will complete not 200, but 300 hours of community service. And you will submit a written reflection each month to your probation officer, not just on your compliance, but on what you are learning about integrity, trust, and restitution. This reflection will be shared, with your identifying details removed, with the local first-time offender program as a cautionary tool. Do you understand and accept these additional terms? Yes, Your Honor. Thank you, I said, the words a breathless rush. It was harder, but it wasn't jail. I could go home. You are sentenced to 2 years of supervised probation, under the enhanced conditions stated. You are ordered to pay all court costs and fees. The restitution is deemed satisfied. Good luck to you, Miss Mendez. I hope the faith your community has shown in you is warranted. Court is adjourned. The gavel cracked. It was over. I turned. First to Brian, who gave me a firm nod and a whispered, "Well done." Then I faced the people from church. Their faces were a mix of relief, empathy, and lingering sadness. Karen Larson offered a small, tearful smile. Amanda gave me a thumbs up. Pastor Mike just nodded, his eyes saying, "The next chapter begins." Lisa was already by my side, squeezing my arm. "Let's get out of here." The hallway outside the courtroom felt different this time. The weight was still there, but it had a shape now. It was a burden I was sentenced to carry, not one that was crushing me in the dark. We walked out into the afternoon sunlight. "I need to go get Caleb," I said to Lisa. "I need to tell him myself. He's at my place with my mom, let's go." At Lisa's apartment, Caleb was building a fortress out of pillows in the living room. When he saw me, he ran over. "Is it over, Mom?" I knelt down. "The big court part is over, yes. The judge said I have to be on probation, which means I have to check in with a special officer and do a lot of community service to help make up for what I did. And I have to keep going to my meetings with Pastor Mike. But I am not going to jail. I'm staying right here with you." He digested this, his little brow furrowed. "So, you're still in trouble? But you're home?" "That's exactly right," I said, pulling him close. "I'm home." That Sunday, for the first time since my arrest, I went to church. Lisa came with me, a silent pillar of support. We sat in the very back row, as instructed. I kept my head down, my heart pounding as the familiar music started. I could feel glances, some curious, some kind. Some still hurt. It was excruciating. When it came time for communion, I stayed seated. That was part of the discipline. I watched the line of people I had known for years go forward to take the bread and cup, a ritual of grace from which I was temporarily barred. It was a visceral, physical reminder of my separation. I felt a pang of such profound loneliness, it took my breath away. I was in the room, but not part of the family meal. Lisa, beside me, slipped her hand into mine and gave it a squeeze. She didn't take communion either, in solidarity. That small act of loyalty from my non-church-going friend was a different kind of sacrament. After the service, people approached cautiously. Some simply said, "Good to see you, Sharon." Others hugged me without words. It was awkward and tender and real. Deacon Johnson shook my hand, his grip firm. "Keep going," he said, his eyes warm. But not everyone was reconciling. I saw a few families deliberately look away. One woman I'd considered a friend gathered her children and walked out a different door. The consequences weren't over. They were just changing form. That night, exhausted, I sat down to begin my first community service reflection for the probation officer. The prompt was simple. What have you learned about trust this month? I stared at the blank document. I thought about the trust I'd violated, the churches, my friends, my sons, my own. I thought about the trust that was being extended to me anyway. By the judge not sending me to jail, by the church not casting me out, by Lisa showing up every time, by Pastor Mike giving up his afternoons. I began to type. I've learned that trust is like a porcelain cup. It takes a long time to shape and fire and glaze. It can hold something beautiful and warm, but it's fragile. One moment of carelessness, one intentional smash, and it's in pieces. You can't unbreak it. All you can do is kneel in the rubble, pick up the shards, and ask for help gluing it back together. And even then, the cracks will always show. The cup will never be what it was. But maybe if you're very careful, it can still hold something. Maybe not for everyone. But for the few who are willing to drink from a cracked cup, that might be the most precious trust of all. I hit save. It was raw and probably not what the probation officer expected, but it was true. A few days later, I was mopping the cafeteria floor when Rita, my supervisor, called me over. Mendez, office, now. My stomach dropped. Was I being fired? Had someone from church complained? I followed her to the small, cluttered administrative office. Sit, she said, lowering herself into her chair. She looked at me, her arms crossed. I got a call. From a pastor. Mike something. My heart sank. Pastor Mike Reynolds? I'm so sorry if he didn't complain, she interrupted. He asked about you. Said he was just checking in as a community reference. Wanted to know if you showed up on time. Did your work. Were honest. She leaned forward. I told him you were the quietest, most thorough cleaner I've had in months. You don't slack. You don't complain. You just do the work. Is that true? What he said about you? That you're in some kind of restitution program? I nodded, humiliated but honest. Yes, ma'am. I made a very bad mistake. I'm trying to make amends. She studied me for a long moment, then grunted. Well, the morning shift lead is transferring. Hours are 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. It's $1.50 more an hour, and you'd be responsible for unlocking, starting the coffee urns, basic oversight. You want it? I was stunned. A promotion. More money. More responsibility. Trust. Yes, I stammered. Thank you. I won't let you down. You'd better not, she said. But there was no malice in it. Now get back to your floor. It's looking streaky. As I walked back to the cafeteria, the mop handle in my hand felt different. It felt like a tool, not just a punishment. A tiny, fragile seed of purpose was trying to sprout in the cracks of my broken life. But that night, as I paid bills with the thin stack of money from my first checks, the reality remained harsh. The court fees were a new drain. The future was a narrow, demanding path, and Caleb, helping me put stamps on envelopes, looked up and asked, Mom, will we ever be happy like we were before? I stopped. An envelope in my hand. The before he remembered was already an illusion. A time when I was faking stability. But he didn't know that. I hope so. Baby, I said, choosing my words carefully. But maybe a different kind of happy. A real kind, where we don't have to pretend about anything. How does that sound? He thought about it, then nodded. Okay. He went back to sticking on stamps. Okay. It wasn't joy, but it was acceptance. We were moving forward, step by heavy step. Yet as I looked at my son, a new fear whispered. This had changed him, marked him. How would that shape the man he became? The consequences of my sin were a tree, and I was only beginning to see the shadow its branches would cast. Community service at the Rockford Family Food Bank was nothing like the hospital cafeteria. Here, the chaos was organized. A symphony of donated cans, volunteer retirees, and the low hum of forklifts. My probation officer, a weary man named Mr. Jenkins, with a mustache that seemed to droop with the weight of everyone's problems, had assigned me here. They always need hands, he'd said, stamping my paperwork. And you'll see where your poor decisions could have led you. Might be good for you. I worked Saturdays, an 8-hour shift that ate into the only full day I had with Caleb. Lisa would take him to the park or the library, another subtraction from our time together that I felt like a physical loss. My job was to sort incoming donations in the back warehouse, a concrete space that echoed with voices and the thump of boxes. It was cold in winter, sweltering in summer, and always dusted with a fine layer of grain from broken pasta boxes. I wore old jeans and a faded t-shirt, my hair tied back. No one knew me here, and I preferred it that way. I kept my head down, sorting cans by type and checking expiration dates with a focus that was almost monastic. Green beans with green beans, corn with corn. It was mindless, repetitive, and there was a strange peace in that. I was making order out of chaos, one can at a time. One Saturday in late February, I was working alongside an older volunteer named Edna. She was 70 if she was a day, with sharp eyes and knotted, capable hands. We worked in companionable silence for an hour before she spoke, not looking up from her box of soup cans. "You're new, court-ordered?" she asked, her voice matter-of-fact. The question was so blunt it startled me. "Yes, ma'am." What'd you do?" I hesitated, the old shame heating my neck. "Theft." She nodded as if I'd said I was in for a parking ticket. "First time?" "Yes." "Good. Don't make it a habit. This here," she gestured around the warehouse with a can of chicken noodle, "is where you end up when life falls apart. Better to be on this side of the table, sorting, than on the other side, waiting for a box." She looked at me directly then. "You got a kid? How did you know?" "Seen that look before. The weight of it. You're carrying his shame on top of your own. That's too heavy for one person. You'll break." Her perception was unnerving. I didn't answer, just kept sorting. "You religious?" she asked after a while. "I was. I'm not sure what I am now." She chuckled, a dry sound. "God's pretty sure what he is, even when we're not. I've been coming here 10 years. Started after my Frank died. Found more of him in handing out boxes of macaroni than I ever did in my pew. He's in the doing, honey. In the hands that serve, even when the heart's a mess." Her words reminded me of Pastor Mike's, but earthier, grounded in cardboard and canned peaches. He's in the doing. Maybe that's why the mindless sorting felt like a kind of prayer. My hands were doing something honest, something that directly helped, one undamaged can at a time. At home, Caleb's quietness was hardening into something more concerning. He came home from school one Tuesday with a bruise on his forearm, faint but visible. When I asked, he shrugged, fell off the monkey bars. But 2 days later, I got a call from his teacher, Mrs. Espinoza. "Miss Mendez." Caleb got into a scuffle at recess. Another boy said something about your situation. Caleb pushed him. "It's not like him. We've handled it, but I wanted you to know." My stomach twisted. "What did the boy say?" A pause. "That his mom said, Caleb's mom is a thief, and he probably steals toys too." I closed my eyes. The poison was spreading. "Thank you for calling, Mrs. Espinoza. I'll talk to him." That night, I sat Caleb down at the kitchen table. "Tell me about the boy at recess," I said gently. His lower lip trembled. "He's stupid, he doesn't know anything. He said something about me, right? And it made you angry." "He said we were criminals." Caleb burst out, tears finally spilling. "He said I couldn't be trusted. I just pushed him. I didn't mean to hurt him. I just wanted him to stop." I pulled him onto my lap, holding him as he cried hard, angry, hurt sobs. My own tears mixed with his hair. I had done this. My sin had armed a second grader with a weapon to use against my son. "I'm so sorry, Caleb. So sorry my mistake is hurting you. You are not a criminal. You are the most trustworthy, good-hearted boy I know. But you can't push people, okay? Even when they're wrong and mean. We have to be the ones who do better, even when it's hard. Can we try that together?" He nodded against my chest, his sobs subsiding into hiccups. "I just want it to stop, Mom." "I know, baby. Me too." The next monthly meeting with Pastor Mike felt different. The weight of Caleb's pain was all I could carry into the room. When he asked how I was, I didn't give my usual, "Okay, getting by." I told him about the bruise, the taunt, the fight. "My consequences are one thing," I said, my voice breaking. "But his? That's a price I never agreed to pay, and he never should have had to." Pastor Mike listened, his face grave. That's the terrible math of sin, Sharon. It always adds interest. It spills over. That's why David prayed, "Against you, you only have I sinned," Psalm 51-4. Not because he hadn't hurt Bathsheba and Uriah, but because he saw that at the root, his rebellion against God was the poison that infected everything else. He leaned forward. But grace spills over too. It's slower, it's quieter, but it finds its way into the cracks. Caleb is learning hard things about hurt and forgiveness far too young, but he's also seeing his mother face the truth. Get up every day and try. That's a lesson too, a costly one, but a real one. He suggested I bring Caleb to one of our meetings. Let him see this process. Let him ask questions. He needs to know this isn't a secret shame we're hiding, but a problem we're facing. With God's help. The following week, Caleb sat shyly in the big chair in Pastor Mike's office. He was scared at first, but Pastor Mike talked to him like a person. He asked how school was. He asked what was hard, and then he said, "You know, your mom is one of the bravest people I know." Caleb looked up, surprised. "It's easy to be good when everyone's watching and things are easy," Pastor Mike continued. "Real bravery is when you've messed up big time, and you choose to do the next right thing, even when it's hard, and everyone knows what you did. That's what your mom is doing every day. She's my hero for that." Caleb's eyes widened as he looked at me. I hadn't felt like a hero. I felt like a wrecking ball. But seeing a flicker of pride, not shame, in my son's eyes was a quiet miracle. It didn't fix the taunts at school, but it planted a different seed in his heart. My promotion at the hospital cafeteria meant a slight financial breather, but the court fees were a constant drain. One afternoon, I came home to find an envelope taped to my apartment door. No stamp, no return address, just my name. Inside was a simple grocery store gift card for $200 and a folded piece of paper. The note read, "For Caleb's lunches, someone who remembers what it's like to be at the end of their rope." I stared at it, tears welling. It wasn't the money, though that was a lifeline. It was the anonymity. No chance for me to grovel. Thanks, no power dynamic. Just sheer, unclaimed grace. I never found out who left it. Maybe a church member. Maybe a neighbor who'd heard. It felt like a direct message. You are seen. You are not alone. It bolstered me for what came next. My probation officer, Mr. Jenkins, called me in for a monthly review. He had my latest reflection paper, the one about the cracked cup, on his desk. "This is different," he said, tapping the paper. "Most people write, 'I'm sorry. I won't do it again.' You wrote about pottery." "I meant every word of the 'I'm sorry too,'" I said quietly. "Oh, I know. I read them all. This one just stuck with me." He leaned back, his chair squeaking. "The court ordered you to share these, anonymized, with the first-time offender program. I showed this one to the group last week. My blood ran cold. My private thoughts, my cracked cup metaphor, shared with a room full of strangers. A kid in there, 19 years old, stole a car stereo. He's a tough case. Angry. Listens to no one. Mr. Jenkins met my gaze. After I read your paper, he stayed behind. Asked if the person who wrote it really believed a broken thing could still be useful. I said I didn't know, but that she was trying to find out. He shrugged. "Just thought you should know. Your consequences are becoming someone else's. Curiosity. Maybe something else." I walked out of his office, stunned. My failure, my reflection, might be a tiny point of light for someone else lost in their own dark. It was too huge to process. It felt like the spillover grace Pastor Mike had mentioned, seeping out in a direction I never intended. Things felt fragilely balanced for a few weeks. Caleb's school incidents lessened. The rhythm of work, community service, and meetings became a kind of grueling stability. I even dared to feel a flicker of hope. Then, on a rainy Saturday in April at the food bank, I saw him. Mark. My ex-husband was walking through the front doors of the distribution area, holding the hand of a small, blonde girl I didn't recognize. He looked older, softer around the middle, dressed in a crisp rain jacket. He was there to pick up a food box. He hadn't seen me. I was in the back warehouse, partially hidden by a pallet of rice bags. My whole body went rigid. The last time we'd spoken was over a year ago. A bitter phone call about a missed support check. Now here he was, in my city, at my food bank, clearly struggling. And he had a little girl. The world tilted. The careful peace I'd built over months cracked like thin ice. What was he doing back in Illinois? Was the girl his? Was he in such trouble he needed a food bank? A storm of questions. And beneath them, a surge of raw, unexpected anger. He left. He got to start over, have a new family, while I was here sorting cans to pay for my crime. It wasn't fair. Edna nudged me. You're white as a sheet. You know that guy? My ex-husband, I whispered. She whistled low. Well, butter my butt and call me a biscuit. Small world. You gonna talk to him? I can't. Panic seized me. I can't let him see me here. Like this. But it was too late. Mark turned, scanning the room. His eyes passing over the volunteers. They locked onto me. His expression shifted from vague impatience to shock, then to a dawning comprehension that morphed into something like pity. He said something to the little girl, then walked toward the warehouse door, toward me. I was trapped. There was no back exit. All I could do was stand there, holding a can of corn, wearing a volunteer vest over my old clothes, waiting for my past to walk in and see exactly what had become of me. Mark stopped just inside the warehouse doorway, the drizzle glistening on his jacket. The fluorescent lights made him look pale. We stared at each other across 20 feet of concrete floor and 10,000 broken things. The little girl hovered near the distribution counter, watching us with wide eyes. Sharon? He finally said, his voice the same but unfamiliar here in this place. Mark. I didn't move. The can of corn in my hand was a cold, hard weight. He took a few steps closer, his eyes taking in my vest, the pallets, the evidence of my sentence. A slow, painful understanding settled on his face. I heard something had happened. From your mom. I didn't know the details. Now you do. I said, my voice flat. I gestured with the can toward the front. You should get back to your daughter. They close the distribution line soon. He didn't move. She's my stepdaughter. Chloe. My wife, Julie. She's sick. Cancer. I brought them back here to be near her family. It's been hard. The words tumbled out, a confession for a confession. He was struggling too. The man who'd left to find a happier life had found a harder one. The anger I'd felt moments before curdled into something more complex. There was no satisfaction in his pain. Only a weary recognition that everyone carries their own sack of rocks. But a hard, small part of me thought, you don't get to come here and share your burden with me. You forfeited that right. I'm sorry to hear that, I said. And I was. But the words were polite, distant. You should get your food. Look at you, he said, shaking his head, not with contempt but with a bewildered sadness. My strong Sharon. Volunteering. A hot spike of shame shot through me. He thought I was here out of charity. He didn't know it was court-ordered. The lie sat on my tongue. Tempting. I could let him believe a better version of me, but that's what got me here, the better version. The illusion. It's community service, Mark, I said, meeting his eyes. I stole money from my church. I was arrested. I'm on probation. This is part of my sentence. The shock on his face was real, followed swiftly by a flood of emotions I couldn't name. Pity. Disappointment. Maybe a trace of grim vindication. You stole? Why? The old, familiar defensiveness rose. Because you left us with nothing. But that wasn't the whole truth. And I was done with half-truths. Because I was desperate and proud and I made a terrible choice. The why doesn't matter to the judge. Or to Caleb when the kids at school call him a criminal's son. He flinched. Caleb? He's okay? He's resilient. He's hurt. He's learning about consequences far too young. I put the can of corn on the conveyor belt. You should go, Mark. Really. He nodded slowly, taking a step back. Then he stopped. Sharon, I'm sorry. For everything. For leaving. For making it harder. It was the first real apology he'd ever offered. It landed in the space between us. A fragile, offered thing. The part of me that had loved him once wanted to grasp it. The part of me that had been surviving without him wanted to bat it away. Thank you. I said because Pastor Mike had taught me to accept apologies simply. I hope Julie gets better. He turned and walked back to the little girl, took her hand, and joined the line. I watched him go, my heart a turmoil of old grief and new pain. Edna sidled up next to me. Well, she said, that was a heap of something. Yeah. You handled it. You told him the truth. That's something. She patted my shoulder, a rare gesture. Now the corn is getting lonely. Keep sorting. I worked the rest of my shift in a daze. Seeing Mark was like reopening a wound I'd thought was scarred over. It bled old questions. What if he'd stayed? What if I'd been stronger? That night, after Caleb was asleep, I sat in the dark living room and let the tears come not just for the theft, but for the failed marriage, for the loneliness, for the sheer exhaustion of carrying it all. The next Wednesday, I told Pastor Mike about it. It felt like I was being punished all over again. I confessed. Like God was saying, see, you haven't suffered enough. Here's a fresh hurt. Or, Pastor Mike said gently, like God was giving you a chance to see your own story from the outside. To see Mark not as the villain of your story, but as a broken man in his own. To practice the forgiveness you've been given. I don't know if I can forgive him. You don't have to today, but you can decide not to let his reappearance poison your new ground. That's a start. He had me read Romans 12:17-18. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everyone. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. I focused on the phrase, as far as it depends on you. My part, my responsibility, not to fix everything with Mark, but to not make it worse. A few days later, a letter arrived. It was from Mark. No return address. Sharon, seeing you was a shock. I've thought of little else. I am so sorry for what you've been through. I bear some responsibility for that. Leaving you in a hard spot. I want to help. I've attached a money order. It's not much, but it's back child support for 3 months. I'll try to send more when I can. Julie is starting a new treatment. Please tell Caleb I love him and I'm proud of him. You're a good mom, even now. Especially now. Mark. The money order was for $900. It was a fortune. It was an apology I could bank. I cried again, but this time from a confused mix of relief, residual anger, and a faint, fragile sense of closure. I used some of it to pay down court fees. I put some in a savings envelope for Caleb. I took him out for pizza. A real treat. Your dad sent this, I told him. He said he loves you and he's proud of you. Caleb chewed his cheese pizza thoughtfully. Is he coming back? No, baby. He has his own family to take care of now. But he's still your dad, and he still cares about you. It was the most peaceful thing I could say. Summer turned the food bank warehouse into an oven. I kept sorting, kept mopping the hospital floor, kept writing my monthly reflections. One afternoon, Mr. Jenkins called. Your community service hours are completed, Mendez. The judge is satisfied. The monthly reflections stop. Just keep checking in with me as usual for probation. It was a milestone. No more mandatory Saturdays. I felt a surge of something like accomplishment, quickly tempered by the knowledge that probation had a year left, and the real work rebuilding a life had no end date. The Sunday after my hours were certified, I went to church. When communion began, I automatically stayed seated. But Pastor Mike, from the front, caught my eye. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. The 3 months of discipline were over. My heart hammered as I stood and joined the line. I felt exposed, as if everyone was watching. But when I reached the front, the elder serving the bread, old Mr. Henderson, who'd pledged $5,000 to the building fund, simply placed the piece in my palm. His eyes were kind. The body of Christ, broken for you, Sharon. Tears blurred my vision as I took the cup. The blood of Christ, shed for you. The taste of the juice was sweet and sharp. It was permission. It was welcome. It was a declaration that I was, despite everything, still part of the body. The cracks and all. After the service, Karen Larson hugged me. We're having a picnic next Saturday at Riverside Park. You and Caleb should come. It was the first social invitation in nearly a year. We'd like that, I said, and meant it. The picnic was awkward and wonderful. People talked about normal things, jobs, kids, the weather. My story was a known thing. But it wasn't the only thing. Caleb ran off with some of the younger kids, his laughter ringing across the grass. I sat at a picnic table with Amanda, and for the first time, I told her about the disconnect notice. The paralyzing fear. She listened, and then she told me about her secret struggle with anxiety medication. Our shared vulnerabilities felt like a bridge. A year to the day from my arrest, I found myself driving past the police station. On an impulse, I pulled into the lot and parked. I sat there, looking at the brick building with its narrow, mirrored windows. I remembered the cold bench, the smell of fear, the absolute conviction that I was lost. Grace found me in the police cell. It hadn't felt like Grace then. It had felt like the end. But Grace had been there in the form of a pastor who prayed for me, a lawyer who advocated for me, a friend who collected my son, a church that didn't cast me out, a stranger in a hospital, a supervisor who gave me a chance, a food bank that taught me service, and even in the painful, clarifying light of consequence, it hadn't erased the past. My record was still there. The memory in Caleb's eyes was still there. The cracks in my relationships were still there. But Grace hadn't erased my story. It had rewritten it from a tragedy into a testimony, not of a perfect life, but of a perfect love that meets us in our worst moments and refuses to let us go. I started the car and drove to pick up Caleb from school. He climbed in, backpack swinging, smelling of sunshine and boy. "How was your day?" I asked. "Good," he said. "We're learning about metamorphosis, like caterpillars turning into butterflies. It's kind of gross, but cool." "Yeah," I said, pulling into traffic. "It is cool." We drove home. Not to a perfect life, but to a real one forged in failure, tempered by grace, and slowly, quietly, being made new.